Well, it's good to see so many friends around today, and if anybody's got any questions, many of you have seen bits and pieces of this, and if I confuse anybody or go too quickly, just holler out and let me know. I've got pictures of the Greater East End Management District up here, and I think you can get some idea of what the area is like. There's a lot of green spaces. We're very close to downtown, but we also include the Port of Houston within the district. There's a lot of unique artwork within the area, and we've got the East End Light Rail coming down Harrisburg that's due to open in a little over a year from now. This is a map of the area, and it's a 16 square mile area. It contains 3,500 businesses. You can see Buffalo Bayou going through it. And I-45 is on the south area. 610 is on the boundary closest to me. Downtown is the area, the other boundary. The area we're going to be spending most of our time talking about today, we'll see here, is this area closest to town, because that is where the Livable Center study focused. We knew that that would be the area that people would be moving into because of its proximity to downtown. And then we expanded the Livable Center's focus to also look at the area that would be impacted by the light rail. So those will be the areas we'll be focused on in our Livable Center's discussion today. This is what the Second Ward area looks like. So it was interesting in preparing for this. I went back to some of the original PowerPoint studies or presentations that were put together when we were deciding as a management district whether we would fund our 20%. And by the way, this was the first Livable Center study done, and the board was a bit hesitant. So this was part of our own internal debates on whether we would fund the study. So this type of broken pavement and broken sidewalks are very typical of the East End. Lots of heavy trucks. This was the pedestrian connection. Any of you who have driven to Nymphes know that underpass that goes into the East End. Well, this is the pedestrian connection that would hook up the East End to downtown. But in spite of all of that, it's a very vibrant community and has a lot of people that live and work there. This is some of the outward manifestations of that vibrant community. This is the old Mercado del Sol that's now a high-end apartment dwelling, and most of the people that live there work downtown. There's also pictures of Talente Bilingue and some of the shows that go on there. We've got a lot of historic aspects there, and at the St. Vincent Cemetery, which you see right here, Dick Dowling is buried. So for those of you who didn't know Dowling Street had a predecessor, Dick Dowling is actually buried there. There's other good reasons to study the East End. Houston Business Journal listed the East End as one of the top 5 places to do business in 2013, and I think this is one of the reasons for that interest is it's located smack dab in the middle of several very important employment centers. And I myself live in the East End, and I've got neighbors that work in all of these different employment centers. Downtown, the Ship Channel, the Medical Center, and U of H. Another major influencer of why do business in the East End are these areas that are colored purple and the areas that are colored this sort of light gray. The purple areas are industrial, and the light gray are undeveloped land. What these signify are about 400 acres of land that are available for redevelopment without moving a single resident. And so, for instance, This is the KBR tract that sold at the end of 2012. So there's a great deal of migration, out-migration of the former industrial base of this part of the city that is moving out to the Beltway. And you know, time is that people are changing where they want to be and they're ready to move out. And then finally, East End Light Rail is coming in, and that's a green one here, and all of this is within the management district. Again, when I went through the old PowerPoint, these were the study objectives back in 2008, and I will say that all of these are objectives that we still have and are still trying to create. We've had probably 75 different meetings with the public. Some of them are big public meetings, some of them are stakeholders, some of them are individual meetings with various landowners or community associations. And we are very much trying to achieve a transformation and bring new investment in the area, but do it with, while remaining true to the sense of place that's there. So what we often hear is, we don't want this to look like Washington Avenue. We don't want it to look like Rice Military, both of which I think are default for redevelopment within the city of Houston. And as all of you know, we don't have a lot of tools to make something different happen in Houston. So what we've been doing is working with businesses, working with homeowners, and at least trying to put down a template for something different. One of the other goals was redesigning the Navigation-Jensen intersection. It was originally designed as a big intersection for facilitating fully loaded trucks, 18-wheelers, and these were some of the pictures that were clipped and included in that 2008 PowerPoint. So now we're getting ready to start on the recommendations that were included in the May 2010 final East End Livable Centers plan. These top drawings right here are pictures of conditions in the East End and the areas that were studied as part of the East End Livable Centers plan. What was done in that plan, we had a series of various alternatives that were available, and people were given green dots for plans or for ideas that they liked and red dots for ideas they didn't. And East Enders were very practical. For instance, some of the alternatives had like ornamental ginger, and they said, no, I don't think that would work in the East End. It'd catch too much blowing trash. So you can see these are pretty ordinary, but they also have sidewalks that work. And if you've driven much in the East End, a lot of times you'll see wheelchairs and people who have trouble walking out in the street because the sidewalks are so broken up. So these were, whoops, went backwards. Try again here. These were the recommendations that came out of the Livable Centers plans. Another one of the major suggestions was for Guadalupe Park improvements. The East End is underparked compared to other parts of the city. The average of parks per the average acreage of parks per 1,000 people is 13 acres per 1,000 people in the city of Houston. In the East End, it's 2.13 acres. So everybody in the East End would like to have as usable park area as possible. Guadalupe Park, you can see there, was really designed to be a performance area to Mercado del Sol. Mercado del Sol was sold off. We talked about that earlier. It's now an apartment building. Moreover, the parking to Mercado del Sol was sold to Perry Homes, so we've now got apartments adjacent to this park that was designed as a performance area. Not surprisingly, the people that live in those apartments don't want to have performances immediately adjacent to the townhomes. As a result, the park's not used very often, except by homeless people. So the goal, in very general terms, is to turn this into much more of a open area, a lawn area that would have a lot more use and enjoyment for the people that live there in the community. And this was really where we started with having a lot of people involved and a lot of community input. That upper drawing here was the red dot, green dot process that I talked about. And when we finished with the Livable Centers plan, we had a series of ideas with costs on them, and we were ready to go out and seek grants. And what this shows is really our first map that we came up with. These were the first two construction projects we had underway. One was a ARA grant, a stimulus grant, for doing work on navigation and York and Sampson. And then the management district put in $2.25 million of its reserves to do work on Harrisburg. When we received the ARA grant, we had people from the community come in and say, you know, how about if you move that stimulus money over to Harrisburg, because we need all of the types of improvements you're talking about doing on York and Sampson and navigation to where the light rail is going in. And we went, well, you can't really do that on a federal grant. They're very specific where you need to spend them. And they said, yeah, but we need shade and we need all of those things that you're talking about doing, you know, benches and lighting and shade, and we need all that along Harrisburg. So that's how we got involved in pulling the reserves of the management district into Harrisburg. As you know, you remember with stimulus grants, it was supposed to be shovel-ready projects, and at that time, Harrisburg was anything but shovel-ready. That was when they were relocating all the utilities, and nobody even wanted to drive up and down Harrisburg. Again, these are our sort of before and after. This is navigation, no sidewalk at all. And this is Sampson, which is a spotty sidewalk. I'm going to go back one. Whoops, no I didn't. Try again here. The importance of York and Sampson for those of you who are not East Enders is they connect up Harrisburg to navigation. They're also major connectors. If you follow it on up, you'll go up to I-10, and if you go down, they connect to I-45. So these are major connectors both for automobile and for pedestrian traffic. This was one of our first master plans, and I just want to call several of the major features to your attention. Again, this was done with lots of community input. People said, we've turned our back on the bayou for a long time. We'd like to reconnect with the bayou, and navigation is not that far off the bayou. A lot of this area in here is old industrial and currently has no dwellings or industry of any type on it. The current industry that's still operational is in this area, but this area is largely blank right now. There are several blocks of houses right off of navigation, but this area is open. They said we'd like to reconnect to the bayou. We would like to have some major arrival points that tell people they're in the East End. We would like to have a wide navigation boulevard that was welcoming to pedestrians, and so that we could stroll up and down. We'd like to have more retail along navigation. We don't want it to be this area where cars go down at 50 miles an hour and none of us feel that we can go strolling along navigation. And of course, we always I think everybody felt that this wasn't just about rebuilding sidewalks and planting trees. It was about revitalizing the neighborhood. So this was one of the first attempts to articulate what it would look like, say, 10 years down the road when we'd managed to attract new retailers, museums, and everybody else that would be coming in and really make this the family-friendly area as opposed to a new bar scene like Washington Avenue. Another technique that we used was to imagine what these areas would look like after we had had all of the improvements installed. One reason for doing this was to help the neighborhood, but another reason was we didn't want every improvement to look different. We knew that we would be funding these over time with a series of different grants, and we wanted to have some unifying principle in mind so that every grant wouldn't look different. So this was our thought for Harrisburg. And here's what it looks like now. We still have lights to come in, we still have benches to come in, and obviously the light rail isn't running yet. I'll update this when we have all of those improvements in place. This was our rendering for York and Sampson. And this is what it looks like currently. Again, no lights, no benches yet, but they're coming. And this was our original rendering on navigation, but as I'll show you, this is going to be more intensively used in the median. The navigation promenade will be open at the end of August this year. So what you see are 3 blocks worth of promenade here, starting at Meridas and going down to Ninfas. In that promenade will be 60 different market stalls, places for 3 food trucks, sidewalk cafes. We'll be planting around 3,000 plants. So it will be activated, and hopefully we'll have many, many people out there. We also made the decision, rather than ordering benches and lighting and so on out of a catalog, about 2 years ago we started with the assistance of Houston Art Alliance to have what we called functional art. Now, part of the requirement under the ARA grant was that we spend a small percentage on art. That would have been like a sculpture in the Esplanade. But what we did is advertise for artists and create these functional art pieces. The top piece are going to be 2 archways that are about 30 feet across at each end of the Esplanade. And as you can see, they're inspired by the Papel Picado concept, and they pick up ideas about the neighborhood with the sailing on from the ports and all about the ports and navigation. The pieces underneath, there are about 5 different ones of these. These all go together. These are seats on benches, and we've got 8 different ones of these in English and 4 of these Spanish dichos. All of these are superimposed on historic photographs that we collected at the Julia Eidson Library, and the English sayings are all either about Houston or Texas. My own personal favorite is a quote from A.J. Foyt that says, "I think a racetrack is safer any day than a Houston freeway." And the picture behind it is a traffic jam like in the 1960s on Houston freeways. So they're, and they're printed on tiles, and the colors and the detail are so amazingly crisp. They're I think people are going to get out there and just be entranced reading them and looking at all of them. And then on the back of the benches are going to be these, and we've got them in 5 or 6 different styles. This one is obviously all about the port. We've got some with railroads. So Juan, I think you'll be happy to know that. If it's East End, you got to have railroads. We've got some that are more focused on the community, you know, with the houses and churches. So these will be on the back of the benches and be like a, you know, the back of the seat. So I think it'll just be something that people will be very excited to see, and these should be going in within the next 3 or 4 weeks. We've got all the tiles in our office right now, and we're just waiting to finish up the benches and the wrought irons being powder coated. You have probably, if you've been down Navigation recently, you've seen El Tiempo. We worked with them. This part is the type of thing we're doing right now along Navigation as we rebuild the sidewalks, and then in this area, El Tiempo paid for that, but they did it in the style of the work that we're doing. These are the lights that our artist created. These are solar lights, and the generators just went up last week. You'll see that there aren't the usual bat wings that you see on solar lighting. What we did, since these are pedestrian lights, it works fine as long as these solar lights aren't under trees. But if solar lighting's under trees, the little bat wing generators don't work very well. So the generators are disconnected from the lighting fixtures themselves and are standalone. And then there's conduit feeding the power from the generators to the lighting. And these are going up in the Esplanade as we speak. And yes, they're being manufactured in Pennsylvania, so they're Buy American.
How tall are they, Diane?
They're 14 feet tall. And they've got different colors around I think we've got 4 different colors around the light. We have custom benches and bike racks. The community voted on the words. They're half in English, half in Spanish, and they're cast concrete. There's no way those things are going to get up and move around. And these are Spanglish, so they're pipe and they're bent. And we think we're going to have to paint bikes in front of them so people will know they're bike racks. This is a project that we have funded under the Tiger Grant. It will be a start on Guadalupe Park. It's not everything we want to accomplish, but it's a start. We'll be building this alley down to Buffalo Bayou. Currently, if you go there, for a variety of reasons, you have very little idea that Buffalo Bayou is in fact back here, and that this walkway down to the bayou exists. So what we'll be doing is building this LA, putting in trees, and installing 33 of those light fixtures that we just looked at, which will both be very attractive and give people the feeling of security to get them down to the waterway. We'll also be doing a lot of demolition to get those old structures out of there and opening that up and planting it with grass. The other major project under Tiger is we'll be doing a lot of connecting and rebuilding of existing trails in the East End. What you see here, this is the Harrisburg Trail that currently exists, and this is the Harrisburg Sunset Trail, also which currently exists. Both of those were installed 15 years ago or so, and they're asphalt trails that are breaking up. Those will be removed and replaced with concrete trails. Precinct 2 is doing some of that work. We'll also be putting in 10-foot sidewalks that connect each of those, or connect at the light rail stops so that people will be able to get to the trail easily from the light rail stops. We'll be connecting those via on-street trails to other trails in other parts of the city. And if you've talked to cyclists, they're all frustrated by the fact that none of these trails interconnect. So if you're coming from the White Oak Trail up in the Heights, if you're coming from the Columbia Tap Trail, or if you want to get into Discovery Green, you'll be able to do all of that when the trail system is completed. You'll also be able to come down from the Magnolia Park Transit Center and get onto the Brays Bayou Trail. During the last 2 years, there's also been a tax increment reinvestment zone created in the East End. At this point, it doesn't have much increment, but over time, as you can see, it's primarily focused here along York and Sampson, navigation, and the light rail. And the goal is that it will help continue to support these reinvestments over time. I am going to give you a little bit of information now about projects that are funded but not yet built. One is the navigation roundabout. You remember we talked about it earlier as needing to happen, and that is funded.
That was at Jensen.
I'm sorry?
Was that at Jensen?
Yes, Jensen and Reynolds. I keep hitting the wrong button. The sidewalks in red are also funded. Both of these are for fiscal year 2015. Just to orient you, this is Harrisburg, this is navigation, and the ones that are in green, sidewalks that are in green, are already funded. All of those in red will be funded in 2015. So you can see that we are really starting to get a network of sidewalks on the ground where people will be out of the street. So just in summary, on the left-hand side of the screen are the major tasks that were in the Livable Centers plan that was published in May of 2010 of major recommendations. Some of these are largely completed. All of them have had work started on them. Some of them have lots of work still to go. Things like improving transit connections. We're going to do a little bit of talking about that on next steps. We've got a study underway. Renovating Guadalupe Park, we've got lots of work still to do on that, but basically we have leveraged our $2.5 million investment into $29 million now of funded projects. So what are our next steps? We're going to talk about 4 major ones that we have underway. And I'm not a great PowerPoint maker, but I stretch this slide. It's sort of out of whack. But one thing we've concentrated on is identifying in those areas where we've got vacant land or industrial land, who owns that land and the status of that property. So like where land is for sale, who owns the property, the current valuation of it, how to contact the owners. So everything that's in these colored blocks, we've got a lot of detailed information back at the office. We also have big plans. When I talked about laying down our template for making this something other than Washington Avenue, this is our template. Just to orient you, here is Guadalupe Park, and you remember the design we had of doing the alley with the lights. Currently, Talente Bilingüe sits right in here, and the grand plan is to move Talente Bilingüe into a new cultural center down here, and there would be a new parking garage built. These are the esplanades that are under construction and will be open soon. I was talking with someone before we started. Long term, we would love to get more funding and do more esplanades and purchase some property in here to have a connection between navigation and canal. So that is a, basically a pedestrian-friendly, user-friendly area that would be on down the road, but we've got a good start on it at this point. Oh no, we don't want to stop. What is it scanning for? Don't do that. So one of our other projects that we've got underway is looking at an urban circulator, and whether it's a rubber tire trolley, a streetcar. We're very, very proud of the East End Light Rail, but this distance from here up to navigation is about 1.5 miles. And if you're dressed like any of us today, in July or August, you're not going to walk that far. And we would very much like to have people ride out on the light rail and go up to eat at Nympha's and walk in the Esplanade and go shopping in the market. So how do we make that happen? And what we've done is look at a variety of alternatives. This is our most recent in our series of, and I'll show you the other two that are both more ambitious, also cost more. What this does is get over to H-GAC, goes all the way along navigation. It's a two-way connection along navigation, comes down to the Dynamo Stadium along St. Manuel, and then goes down along St. Manuel into Edo. Now, believe me, we've got a steering committee. There's been lots of people drawing lots of lines. We've had lots of public hearings, and you can draw lines until you go crazy on this. If and when this property is developed up here, it makes a great deal of sense to extend a line up north of the bayou, at least maybe not make the entire loop, but for a portion of this. Also, to come across here, particularly if the, oh gosh, I'm blocking on the name of that development now that was just bought by Midway. If that comes online. Pavilions. There we go. Thank you. Another possibility is to catch the county courthouse complex or go clear on over to the theater district into downtown. But all of these get much longer and cost a great deal more. So I think, the first one that we'll look at funding is that very short one that I showed you. What would look great is if we had a plan something like the city of Dallas, where they've got streetcar possibilities off of all of their light rail endings in their near downtown areas, trying to get people around. This is their last mile solutions, where they've got enough density to support streetcars. And it takes a while to get the funding, but if you don't have the plan, then you're not going after the funding when it might be available. Finally, we're about to start strategic planning based on economic development, and we'll be working with Avalanche Consulting. We've put together a steering committee that's represents users throughout all parts of the district. we're going to be, we've got apartment owners, we've got major industrial facilities, we've got major property owners, professionals that live in the area. So we've got about 33 different people on our steering committee. And our goal is to use the results on this to guide our next service plan and also to come up with a new economic development strategy that will guide where we go from this point. You get to see that twice, aren't you lucky? So, we know we've got a long way to go, but meanwhile we have lots of fun, and this was opening up our first sidewalk on Harrisburg Boulevard, and you see here the Dynamo mascot and KIPP Academy kindergartners who led us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we probably had 200 people there that day. We had a very good time, and you wouldn't think that a nice sidewalk would produce such joy, but on the East End it does. And then last year on Cinco de Mayo, we had our East End Street Fest, which this year is going to move to Navigation on the Esplanade, and I would love to invite all of you to come on October the 19th and join us. The city this year is going to co-sponsor, and we'll have 2 different sound stages filled with East End performers, and we'll have taco trucks and you name it. We'll have all sorts of fun and games there. But the goal is to keep celebrating each step along the way and keep the progress happening and to keep the East End while we're doing it. So any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What about drainage? Is it a problem?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. The macro answer is that one reason the East End was settled first is that it's high. So for instance, if you look at Buffalo Bayou, the last place it floods is Clayton Homes. You know where that is? Just as you come out of downtown. All the rest of Buffalo Bayou is up high and doesn't flood. But we've got lots of old streets and that don't function very well anymore and flood regularly. So one of our goals with the TERS is to do a drainage study. So we've got lots of localized flooding problems, but we don't have the sort of flooding problems that, for instance, are along Lower Braes. Yes, sir.
I haven't seen the construction on Harrisburg. Did they raise the railroad tracks so that in between the major intersections you have to walk up onto a curb to cross the tracks to cross the street, or do you have to go to the intersections?
Does everybody know what Clark's talking about? It's really noticeable on the North Line because there it's like so. It varies, Clark, but the most it seems to be raised is like, what would that be, 2 or 3 inches? Most of the time it's not raised very much at all, which is sort of awkward in the East End because so many people drive trucks and they just wheel right over the middle of the tracks right now, especially since there's no train running.
I guess as a bicyclist, can I ride across the
Yeah,
track?
you wouldn't have any trouble.
Okay.
Particularly at intersections, we've got that fancy paver work in there, and that's all flush. The rails are down in the pavement. Yes, sir.
I just had a comment on those solar lights. Those weren't only developed in Pennsylvania, but they were designed at the University of Houston Green Component Program.
That's exactly right. Metal Labs designed them. Yes, ma'am.
Diane, will these improvements be moving east as well?
The improvements will go the length of Harrisburg down to the Magnolia Park Transit Station, which is at 72nd. So that's how far it'll go for now. It'll also go along the bike trails. So we'll have lighting, benches, and all of that along the bike trails. And so that's, up along the Harrisburg Sunset Trail. Now we're not going all the way over to Loop 610, but we're getting quite a bit of coverage with doing all of the trails too. Yes, Marco.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your roundabout? I mean, I'm big on roundabout south of Mexico.
The roundabout is so funny, Marco, because we don't have many in Houston. And we got reluctant okay, and it's going to be designed here in Houston, but it has to go to some expert in California for final approval to be sure it really works. And obviously we need the turning radius so that the trucks can still come through. But everybody's sort of holding their breath on this one. We haven't started the design work. This will be, another year from now before we get started on it. But the city said that, they're okay with it, but as I say, it's got to go to California for final design okay.
So Lenny, all the improvements that stop at Jensen and Navigation, it doesn't go down Ronalds?
No, it doesn't go down Runnels.
Okay. So none of the residents or people down Clayton Homes in that area, that's not included in the East End?
Well, no, it is included in the East End. So far, we haven't had grants go down that far.
There are no grants in them?
This is as far as we've gone right now, and we'll go into Guadalupe Park.
But it is part of East End, though, right?
I think so, yeah. I think we go all the way. The border's sort of strange there, but I think we do go all the way. Yes, sir.
So you've got, I think, 5 sources of funding, the district, of course, and then ERA, the stimulus, $5 million, and then the Tiger Grant, then the Bayou Greenway Initiative, and then TIP.
The Bayou Greenway Initiative is not one of them, Clark. It's all through the Tiger Grant.
So, but through all that, you're able to make the pedestrian, bicycle, transit connections by pretty complex combination of funding.
It is, and it's what we're really hoping to do in this next round of planning is to come up with a document that's as useful to us as the Livable Centers Plan has been, because that Livable Centers Plan has really guided us on looking for grants because all of these elements that are in here are elements that were identified in the Livable Centers Plan. So we went around looking for funding to meet, to fund those projects.
Well, I especially like the ability for the Columbia Tap to go to White Oak to Buffalo. And is that being paid through the Bayou Greenway Initiative or
Tiger.
Through Tiger?
Yes, sir.
Any observations or suggestions for other groups that might be looking at doing a livable center? It sounds like y'all, it's been a very useful plan. Do you have any observations or some mechanics of that process?
Well, it's I guess several comments. One, I think it helped us to have some specific projects with some estimates on the cost. Livable Centers, you've probably seen a variety of them. Some of them are relatively general in concept, and you know, those are good too, but what ours enabled us to do is to actually use that to go for grants and grant funding. And yes, you have to do more detailed study and estimates, but at least you could get in the ballpark for how much some of these would cost. And I don't know that there will ever be another ARA where you don't need a match. So, you know, you have to have money to get money. So you have to have some match somewhere. And I think that's been a big stumbling block for a lot of Livable Centers participants. And then you just have to be really persistent. Chris and I were talking, I rounded him up to come down when we were trying for some earlier funding that we didn't qualify for. And you know, you just have to keep coming back and keep the big plan in mind, and it takes a while. You know, you just have to keep coming.
I would say also that having your tax increment reinvestment zone and your management district in place are major contributors to that.
Yeah, so far we don't have any money in the TERS, but
even so,
yeah,
knowing that it's there and it's going to be coming.
You're right. You're right. And I saw another hand. Juan, yes.
Very good presentation. I think the question for you. Are you attracting industrial development? And that, how does that? How will they coexist? How will they be able to live and be a good neighbor with the residential aspect of it?
I think our land is getting too pricey for industrial development. You know, especially the stuff in the second ward is now, you know, $20 a square foot, and I don't think that that's probably, you know, along navigation, for instance, off navigation. You know, I don't think those are. It's now going $15 a square foot. I don't think those are industrial land prices.
What's happened with your present recurring industrial things? You have substantial, I'm just thinking of the coffee roasting plant.
It smells really good, yeah. You know, there are some, like the coffee plant, that just have such major investments, I don't think they'll pick up and move. What I understood Juan's question to be, Marco, is are we attracting new industrial facilities?
Right.
I don't think a new one would come in at that cost of land. Whereas somebody like Maximus that has, you know, not only the coffee roasting facility, but they've got their finishing plant up there at Clinton and Lockwood. You know, they've just got such a major concentration of investment there. I don't think they're going to pick up and move anytime soon. Yes, ma'am.
Can I add that one of the things, though, that is happening in that area is that if you think in terms of industry, it's a smaller industry that I think we're seeing. I'm a neighbor there also, seeing a lot of cottage industry that's popping up, and so that they don't have to buy a lot of land. They're still able to afford it, and the smaller businesses still employ actually some of the local folks also. Thank you for your presentation on tonight.
Thank you.
Along those lines, do you have any resources or workshops or guidance for small businesses who may be interested in investing or moving in neighbors starting businesses in the East End?
You know, something we've talked about is trying to get microfinancing or something like that in place. We don't have any of that yet, but just check in with us again because we're working on that. Any other thoughts, questions?
I know most of you need to get back to your jobs, so if you don't have any more questions.
I think there was one more.
I just have a quick question. If you have an update as to the status of the railroad museum, that's going to happen?
You know, they're looking at 2 different sites, and I still don't think they've made up their mind.
They're looking at a site on Union Pacific, but.
And one in,
They still need some funding for us, and also looking for Palm Mall.
right, the one in Tomball and the one there in the East End, so.
But I'm with you, Pete, we're in touch with the people that directed the railroad. And speaking of that, you mentioned the museum district that you're looking at developing there along with.
Yeah.